morning. You are watching Focus on Parliament on Civic Space TV, brought to you by the Center for Constitutional Governance. I am Kwagala, your host. Recently, Uganda's political scene has witnessed strong agitation, especially from opposition political parties, for government to adopt electoral reforms as a means of improving our electoral system. Well, in this respect, the former leader of the opposition in parliament, the member of parliament representing Nyendo Mpuuga constituency, that is the Honorable Matthias Mpuuga, is the latest sole political actor to wade into this debate by proposing a raft of proposals aimed at reshaping and reforming the entire electoral regime of the country. On today's edition of Focus on Parliament, we discuss the likely impact of these proposed pieces of legislation and how they could impact on the elections in the run-up to the 2026 general elections. Our esteemed viewers, you are most welcome to this program. I now have the pleasure and the honor to introduce to you my guests who are in studio today to help us discuss and break down today's topic. Let me start with my immediate left is Mr. Timothy Chemonges, the Associate Director for the Center for Policy Analysis and the Parliament Watch. Timothy, you're most welcome to the program. Say hello to the viewers.
Thank you, Isaac. Good morning to our viewers. I'm glad to be here, particularly looking at the topic that we are discussing today around elections, which forms the basics within the structures of democracy. And so I look forward to a very fruitful discussion, but also engaging the audience in light of the thoughts around the elections. Thanks.
It's a pleasure to have you. Next to Timothy is Clive Odhiambo, who is a policy analyst and the founder, the Toweza Foundation. I hope I got that right. Yes, Clyde, say hello to the viewers.
Hello everyone. Good morning. My name is Clive Odhiambo, as Isaac has said, founder of Toweza Foundation. I'm happy to be here this morning to discuss on critical issues of our country and what shapes us, the young people. Because when you see such reforms happening, we are glad that something is changing in our country. Thank you.
Many thanks indeed for joining us. Timothy, let me start with you. Significant to note is, I think, the other key development that has happened in the week ending, where the Justice and Constitutional Affairs Minister, while addressing the media, indicated that he's set to hold a meeting with the President to discuss electoral reforms. Thereafter, which he hopes to have the resolution of that discussion introduced before the wider forum, which is Cabinet, for further consideration and adoption. And there it can be hoped that then Parliament next can also have its input regarding that. But for the benefit of the viewer, give us a historical context of the concept of electoral reforms and governance in the country.
Thank you, Isaac. The matter that we are discussing today is very critical, both in shaping the future of the country, but also in determining how the citizens become and form part of the governance in the country. And elections to that is of its importance to the democratic dispensation of the country, because it forms a very strong pillar in terms of how democracy is shaped in the country. And so the question of electoral reforms is one of those ways in which we strive as a people, as a country, towards creating a better way of ensuring that democracy in our country is clearly shaped. And so is to say that the journey around elections, and for our case, we've had a very interesting journey around the process of electoral reforms, starting from the 1960s when we first had our elections, and there were a bit of contestation, but also you progressively saw that the citizens then were demanding for better ways of ensuring that citizens can participate meaningfully in determining and electing their leaders, who they can hold accountable. And so the proposals by Honorable Mpuuga comes in very timely in terms of contributing towards how people determines their leaders. It's true and definitely right that we are out of time if you look at the electoral roadmap, in light of ensuring that these reforms make a bit of meaning to the process. We, however, must look at it from both the technical and the political side of it. The electoral reforms, as we've seen in the past, where the court has, have clearly issued directives in light of the challenges that, or in light of the disputes that have been addressed or presented before court. We've seen some of those not actually implemented, others are yet to be implemented. And so seeing the reforms by the private member, Honorable Mpuuga, I think it's a move in the right direction, though in terms of timing, we are out of time. Or the agitation of electoral reforms has seen a bit of a setback within our dispensation. Recently, in 2000 and in the run-up to 2016 elections, civil society organizations, together with other stakeholders, actually went around the country, and that was when we had the Citizens Compact. Went across the country to pick the citizens' perspectives, views on what they truly desired to see in the electoral reforms. And we had a number of recommendations, including ensuring that we have an independent electoral commission. There are issues to do with the participation of the military in the electoral process, whether there were concerns then that the military had decided to be partisan and therefore giving an unfair advantage, to the incumbency. There were questions to do with the registration and the transparency of the register. And so there were many other recommendations that came out from the Citizens Compact. And the expectation then was that most of these would result and culminate into a clear legal framework that would inform the subsequent elections. Unfortunately, most of those have not been implemented up to date, unfortunately. Partly because, of course, the establishment as it is today greatly benefits from the sort of structure as it is. You'll notice that, for example, issues to do with the participation of the military in the elections, and we even had some of those other recommendations which, up to date, unfortunately, have not been implemented. So, looking at it, for example, the issues of access to media, access to media, free and fair access to media. As in the previous elections, you could see that it is only those that are aligned to the establishment that seems to enjoy access to most of these. You could see Bobby Wine and those that are in the opposition had a bit of limited access to the elections. Issues to do with transparency in the election financing. Again, that's a matter that we still hope that it can be regulated within the law, but it's still a big of an issue. It's an issue, especially by the participants in the elections, to ensure that we have a fair and a leveled ground where people can participate. Proportional representation, the reduction of members of parliament, which is a good idea, but to the numbers that is still proposed, they're quite high. So as we stand today, we have 529 MPs. He proposes for a reduction of around 342, having at least one directly elected member of parliament and one woman member of parliament. I mean the constituents, the constituent MPs. And again, he proposes, you know, an upper house, which would a bicameral parliament. Again, of around 39, you know, 39 members of parliament, which I think it's a good idea, but we need to first fix, you know, the issues around the national parliament. To ensure that it can be in a space where it serves the interests of the people. I see the other proposal, which is around the reinstatement of the presidential term limits. A good idea, because we lost the chance of ensuring that we can entrench it. But I think that this if successfully amended, we should make it as a core. In the
provision of the Constitution.
Absolutely. That any process to amend that must actually maybe come after a period of time and must involve the citizens and not just the members of parliament. The proposal around having MPs not being ministers, that the ministerial position you shouldn't mix, you know, members of parliament to be ministers. I think it's a good one. I've seen Kenya has attempted to do that. And all elected members of parliament, once appointed ministers, you relinquish the former.
Resign,
and you take the appointment. I think that's a brilliant idea, partly because of the competing interests that sometimes these positions present. You have to serve the interest of the ministerial positions, but also, you know, you have to represent the people. So sometimes it can be overwhelming, and so having ministers who are strictly focused in delivery becomes very important. Of course, the proposal to reduce them becomes a brilliant one. The proposal around challenging the presidential election results by any voter, while it looks good, I think it presents a bit of a problem, to the extent that you are likely to open a floodgates of, you know, of petitions. Everyone bringing a petition against, you know, an electoral process.
And the idea would be to some sort of consolidate them and then prosecute it jointly as one. If it is targeting the same process and the exact same parties.
It's actually a good idea, but you see, we have to ensure that you don't present this to be a political to make it, you politicize the electoral process, which becomes a bit of a problem. But and again, I know this arises from the point of the recent elections that we had, where the petitioners, led by the candidate Chagulanyi, decided to withdraw, which really denied the citizens the opportunity, denied the country the opportunity for court to make a pronouncement on some of those key issues. Because every time there is a petition, the pronouncements by the court make a step to the country, by the country, towards having a better electoral process. So this may be a good idea. The issue of voting rights by the citizens abroad and those in prisons, I think this is a matter that requires political goodwill, because these are citizens, these are people that are actually qualified to vote, and so it is a good idea. It's just a reiteration of what is needed. But more importantly, I think that for these electoral reforms, there is need for government, first of all, to appreciate for the need of them. Otherwise, they also may become redundant. You've seen what the minister in charge of constitutional affairs says, that let's go and consult first with the head of state. Whether, if he rejects, then that means there's really no step that we'll make. And so we still have a dilemma in terms of having a deliberate goodwill of ensuring that our electoral process are free and fair and really reflect the aspirations of the people. Yeah.
Clive, as a young citizen, and also quite one that is keenly interested in the political affairs of our country, What is your assessment of these proposals? Because the Honorable Mpuuga has proposed a number of changes to improve the quality of the electoral processes in the country. What is your assessment of his proposals?
Oh, thank you so much, Isaac. So I think also the Honorable Mpuuga is trying to remind Ugandans that the 1995 Constitution was a better one still, because remember, if we're talking about the presidential term limit, it was there. It was just recently worked on and changed. That was in early 2000s, was it 2001, when there was that change of term limit from, I think, was it 2 terms?
Yeah.
Then I think the age limit was one that was worked in 2017, if I clearly remember. So something that I was thinking when I was coming is that I think when you're squeezed, you get sense when you're squeezed. So I think with the pressure that Honorable Mpuuga has been getting from his party, the NOP, he has started having some sense, because I see his proposition as having a sense. Because if we benchmark Kenya, why Kenya brought in the term limit was, I think when the late Jomo Kenyatta died in 1978, the deputy then Moi took over the country up to 2002. And that's when they said, no, there's something that has to be done. So then there was, I think, opposition coming together and giving Kibaki. Kibaki also wanted to remain in power for next year. Then 2013 they changed their constitution to what they're using now. And that's when we have the cabinet secretaries having, I think, 21, 23 people, with that only gender inclusive. Ministers not being MPs. We can pick. They're trying. Kenya is a fast economy. I think we can pick light of that. So I think it also gives us hope as young people that where we are going, there's some sense. Because recently, before even allowing people of 18 to stand for president, and also people of 78 to step down, the constitution was barring different people that you can't stand for president for this year. But also saying that president should lead for 2 terms or whatever term he is going to propose, it means that it also gives other people a chance. That still in Kenya, that after Uhuru Kenyatta finishing his 10 years, 2 terms, he had to leave, whether he's liked or not liked. And I remember what Barack Obama when he was giving his closing remarks after his 8 years. He said, "How much America still love me, but I can't change the constitution to continue leading. I have to leave." So it guides us in the right direction to follow. That in case there's if at all we successfully transition from, one time when either the current president will retire, or say that I'm giving the man to the next person, we know that even the person will take his maybe 2 terms and leaves to the other people. It encourages even parties to participate. He talked about, of course, reducing the number of MPs to, I think, 146 women, 146 elected MPs. That makes sense, because when you're struggling with the issue of the challenges affecting Uganda, if you look at infrastructure, if you look at the health, education, funding to cities, what is hindering all this is the biggest chunk of money spent by Parliament, right? Because having 539 MPs, and if we say that average they're getting 36, that's a big chunk of money, right? Going to Parliament, that even to sometimes I look at it and see it as sometimes they are serious or non-serious matters. Yeah. So I think when we reduce the number, we shall have a big chunk of money remaining. That is, if at all, it will be now put to the right use, because there's also this money remaining, and it's again corrupted, because we have a lot of issues of corruption in this country. He talks about declaration of results from the district level, where the local returning officer is given mandate. Yeah, it's a good one. So far we have around 149. How many districts do we have in Uganda? 100 plus something. It's a lot, but I'm sure we are in a global village where the agents can call and say, Busia, this was the number, Kapchora, this was the number, Kampala. But still, Kenya tried it because Kenya elections are always declared at the constituency level. And we all know the 2017 where which form, DCR form, what, a number of forms were manipulated somewhere. So it led us somewhere. It shows that we're going somewhere, even if there are those challenges that will also come, because some country that is trying it is facing it. But it shows us that we can now not only wait for the national returning officer to tell us that, Buse, we got this. Because I was an observer in the recent election. And
where? In Kenya?
No, in
Oh.
I know you want me to be international. They should take me to observe the election. Yeah, I was an observer in the
Because
previous.
Kenya is a regional benchmark.
No, in Uganda. And of course, we had friends across the country. And there's a time that a friend called me and said, Guy, I am seeing Bugiri. This person got this and this person got this. Is that what you guys have in your... And of course, the National Returning Office is the final man. And of course, I like the way sometimes they say that we have not counted these votes in this district. Even if we count them, don't add sense, the other person wins. So it gives one person to be a superior of something that all citizens should be engaged in. Of course, the size of parliament, that will help us because we shall have a balance of money going to useful activities, creating jobs for the young people. The census report gave us that 51% of the young people are idle. So this could help us see how to engage these young people, depending on what idle they meant. Because I'm sure most of you still have issues with the census report. Yeah. So I think that also allowing prisoners and people abroad to vote is giving them their civic right. Because if I'm a Ugandan, like I did my undergrad outside Uganda, and if it finds me there, I have a right to vote my president, right? So most countries are doing it. Why not Uganda? Are we too small? If recent election of Rwanda, there was election in Uganda, and we keep saying that at least we are a step ahead of Rwanda. So there are things that we need to show that we are growing. It shows also growth. So I want to appreciate the Honorable Mpuuga for such thoughtful submissions or bills that he wants to present to Parliament. Then just something small on what my brother Timothy has said, that at least even if we're thinking about reducing the number of Parliament, we should also work on our system. That how do we make sure that the executive is, is independent, the judiciary is independent, and the legislature is independent. It's just like following up the ongoing issue in Kenya, where the court had to say that we are independent body, we can't block what the National Assembly is already doing. Let them do the impeachment, we can't stop them. The court does not have power to stop the National Assembly because we are different bodies. So we want to be in a country where even if we have quite a reduced number of MPs, of course he's saying that this will also help people to talk, because I wonder a young honorable, a new parliamentarian from a local place, maybe in Koboko, meeting the likes of Honorable Semuju, they will not put up their hand, they will fear. So if there's a reduced number, perhaps they will get a chance of speaking. I know of an MP who has finished 10 years in parliament, but I've never said anything. So I think because of the environment, the fear, so I think reduced number will help them, would help them speak. I was talking on independence. So if we have a legislature, the MPs who can decide on their own, not asking for, of course there is sharing of knowledge, but not saying that I'm going to ask what the president decides, because you're a minister, and before being appointed minister, should have the qualification. So somebody trusts in you and says, you're going to do this. So yes, there's sharing, but not, because when we say that he's going to ask the president, and when the president says no, this is, then it stops there. Then we're not moving. We are led by one person, and So I would like to be in a country where the systems, are independent and are able to, bring out resolution that help the local people. Yeah, thank you.
Tim, let us now interrogate quite an interesting aspect to this conversation, because what is clearly standing out now, unlike all the previous times, is that there seems to be tacit support from unusual quarters. This time round, the president strongly advocating for a change in the electoral system to introduce strictly electronic voting. But also previously, he has strongly commented on the aspect of electoral pre-financing or financing for that matter. And he has indicated his support to sponsor a bill in parliament, a piece of legislation which will be aimed at regulating that space of campaign financing. So should this signal maybe this time round the broad-based support for the proposed electoral reforms? Could we see some sort of broad-based consensus from all the stakeholders, especially from the political class?
So there is a bit of a challenge in terms of having a collective understanding of what we need as a country. You've heard the president complaining recently in some of his remarks that some of his votes were stolen.
Yes.
So he seemed to suggest that the electoral process as it is now is not okay. And the same, the opposition have also equally raised the same concerns, in light of rigging of elections. And so there are complaints on both sides. And so what that means is that there is definitely a problem in light of transparency, in light of having the electoral reform, the electoral commission having to independently execute the mandate. And so to the extent that there are issues, whether they are valid or whether it's playing to the gallery, I think there are fundamental issues that we have to address in the electoral process. Now, the president's concern around the use of electronics, and it is a good idea, but in light of where we are at today as a country, in terms of internet access, in terms of uptake of this internet across the country and especially in the rural areas, there are challenges. Recently in the past election, where we were using there was an electronic system, biometric. You could see that it was failing even in some of the places. In fact, where I vote from, it failed, and it's here in Kampala.
Even at my polling station.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So
we had to resort to the manual register.
Yeah. So it's still an issue. So the uptake of technology, the uptake of internet is still an issue, and so we are likely to be in a space where, while the law allows for that, in terms of practicality, it becomes a bit of. But nonetheless, it's a good step. It's a conversation that we must have as a country. Now, why is it that we are 1 year away from the elections and some of these conversations are now coming? In the previous decisions by the courts have recommended that electoral reforms must be implemented or must be discussed at least 2 years after the elections, to give an ample time to the commission, but also the citizens to meaningfully participate in this process. So it must tell you that the interest involved in these elections are quite high, and many times, of course, any defect in the electoral process is to the advantage of the incumbent. You know that, partly because the advantages that come along with the incumbency. And so I think that beyond the proposals that have been presented, there is a bigger conversation in light of where we want this country to go. And for one, I think that while the elections are important, we have a problem in terms of governance in this country. And we must have a conversation on what we want to see post the president, post Museveni. Because I know elections is one of those. You've seen proposals around championing a parliamentary democracy, which seems not to be in any of these proposals as it stands now, but it's an item that is also on the table, on whether we should be able to consider that as a country. I think the country, whichever direction we want to take, it must be in the best interest of the people of Uganda to ensure that we can guarantee good governance in this country, but also ensure that the citizens have a say in how they elect their leaders, including the president. And so when we have proposals on the table, irrespective of whatever proposals they are, I mean, everyone should have an opportunity to present whatever they want. We look at them in their own merits and decide as a country. But more fundamentally, the ethics that the 1995 Constitution establishes on the respect of the rule of law and the respect of the people in terms of them participating in this process, both in the legal framework, but also in determining who their leaders are. We have a problem in terms of the Electoral Commission itself. There are concerns definitely around their availability of sufficient resources for them to fully execute the mandate, but also some of the other challenges that the courts have in the past proposed, including the citizen compact, where you have where we as a country must guarantee each and everyone, the elected and the electorate, to have free and fair participation in this process, so that then we are able to have leaders that are accountable, leaders that are able to deliver, but also they can be accountable to the people. The consequence of having a mad electoral process is leaders that actually the impunity levels are extremely high. Two, when it comes to ensuring that service delivery is enhanced, is something that is greatly affected. Isaac, I can tell you for a fact that in the country it's becoming extremely expensive to be a leader. That comes at the expense of the citizens. Recently the studies that were released showed that remember, you need an average of around 500 million, and that's just that's among the list of a prospective member of parliament to head there. There are those that use up to 1 billion and more, you know. So what that means is that the leaders will, upon taking the leadership position, will work extremely hard to recover their money, you know, and that comes at the expense of service delivery. What that means is, if you have a member of parliament in parliament and they have spent, say, 1 billion in the elections, it means that their decision making sometimes will be affected, partly because of their efforts to reclaim their money in whichever way possible. And so that affects the service delivery to the people, but also to the growth of the democracy. And so I think that as a country we must continue pushing, we must continue demanding for better in terms of the electoral laws, but also beyond the electoral laws. I think we have to discuss and see, where does post-Museveni era leave the country? Because as it is true, the president is quite popular in certain quarters of the country, and the country largely. I for one, Kapchorwa, the president seems to be quite popular there. Is quite popular among the people there. But it poses a threat if we do not have a clear successive plan in this country. Because the president, while he has done a great job, he has brought us to where we are at, I think he has to start planning on his exit, so that we have a mechanism of consolidating the gains that we've been able to realize and work towards, you know, a better country.
Timothy, before we go into a break, do you have faith in the Honorable Norbert Mao, the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, in his abilities to convince the President to yield to the expectations of the public and accept the proposals with respect to the electoral reforms to be firstly debated in Cabinet and also consequently in Parliament, with the view of improving the quality of our electoral processes and the general democratic landscape.
You know, in politics, the common denominator is interest. And once my interest can be catered for, then I could pave way. As it stands now, the question is how do the proposed electoral reforms cater on the interest of the president? And I think that's the bare things that are out there. Does it serve the interest of the president and the president as an individual in the first place? I think that as it stands now, and listening to Mao's submission in this previous week, in light of him going to convince the president, you know, and trying to make a very formidable case, is being politically correct to the extent of understanding who wields the power and who determines how things take direction. But I think that we may not be able to realize a lot from that again, to the extent that these proposals are not serving the interest of the president and the current establishment. I mean, there is very little that can be realized. But ultimately, I think that we may not realize much from Mao's initiatives of ensuring that he's going to convince the president, because we've seen some of these efforts in the past, and they have not yielded a lot, irrespective of how good they are. So there's a big task on the citizens of this country, that we have to work towards having a good governance structure in this country. And it starts with the elections. Looking at the budgets and how some of these resources are being distributed, resources around civic awareness is barely there, you know, towards engaging the public to understand what their mandate is. Some of the challenges we had in the past elections was, you know, it was voter apathy, you know, where the majority of the citizens seems to, you know, have given up, or they seem to think that some of these elections are already predetermined, you know. So that's a problem that we have there. But ultimately, I think the ball is on the citizens. The politicians, from where I stand, have failed to deliver or provide the country what they deserve. The ball, in terms of governance, in terms of pushing for what we want, is on the citizenry. And we must ensure to engage the public, to push, to demand, to participate, and ensure that we have a better country.
Thank you, Timothy, for sharing your perspective with us. Focus on Parliament now takes a short break. When we return, we continue the conversation on the proposed electoral reforms by Honorable Mpuuga. Do stay with us. We'll see you shortly.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back. You are watching Focus on Parliament on Civic Space TV. In this segment, we continue the discourse on the proposed electoral reforms as mooted by the Honorable Matthias Mpuuga in Parliament and what they portend for the wider Ugandan political landscape, even as we prepare to go into the 2026 general election cycle. Clive, let me come to you. This is a very serious national conversation and extremely sensitive issue since it goes to the very core of the governance question in the country. But I want to ask, what is the sincerity of the actors that are mooting these electoral reforms? Because come to think about it, according to the electoral roadmap of the Electoral Commission, we have just about maybe at most a year to actually get to the elections. So is it possible that firstly, Cabinet can consider, discuss, thrash out all these very serious issues regarding the electoral reforms, and then Parliament also considers the same, has a very intensive debate, and then we have them actually incorporated into our legal framework. What is your take on that?
Thank you so much, Isaac. And again, I think, was it 2 months ago, or it's been an ongoing process. The Electoral Commission has been, I think this was so much affecting local government, the councillors. They've been trying to compress, put villages together and bring one human representative councillor, something like that. But MPs remained. So I don't think that even there will be funding to the Electoral Commission to do this, because that would mean the Electoral Commission redrawing the whole country and saying that now, because Busia we have woman MP, we have 5 MPs, woman MP 1, Samia Bugwe South, North, that is 3, 4 municipal. I mean, we have 4 MPs. So saying that 2 MPs are coming, that would mean that we have 5 MPs with Central. So that would mean that Central South have 1 MP, then maybe North South, some North and Central, and so it really goes again to drawing, which I don't think that with the way we are working as Uganda, I think we have a lot of time. We think that we can do most of these things in the next 100 years, because I would again relate us to Kenya. Like if the impeachment motion is happening in Kenya, they say you have 6 days, and you see National Assembly, Senate in the next 6 days. So the impeachment was ending on Saturday, 10 days. So they had to make sure that by Saturday things are done. But for us here, there's a way we go slow. Now I have a motion. I have this. I want to present Parliament. I will take again one month trying to convince the president. Now again we shall take 1-2 more months trying to engage the cabinet. Then by the time it comes to the House, again maybe Speaker will say, now I'm sending all MPs for recess for 2 months to go and consult. Do you even do consultation? When they go to their homes, they call they have their village meetings and come back and say and tell the Parliament what they thought. So I don't think that with our timing, from what I've seen in my lifetime growing in this country, we can manage to expedite this within the 1 or less years remaining. And also, with just the recent budget that, Uganda, the country gave close to 700 billion for census. Now NIRA is asking for more, about 700 billion again. Then again, EC again asking for more money to just. I don't think that is possible, because as a country we all know that we have inadequacy of funds. But the thing that are possible to handle. For example, restoring presidential term limit. What does that need? If at all the president agrees with the Minister of Justice and says, that is okay, I mean, the cabinet will approve, because he's the one who heads the cabinet. When it goes to Parliament, of course, I like the way the country moves, that there's that communication, that when the president agrees, even Parliament, because the president has the biggest number the parliament, they will agree. So that will not need again, bigger budget and all this and cost. I mean, but again, there is also something that that we need to know, that of course the 1995 Constitution gives EC powers to engage every stakeholder, civil society, a local person, right from the village to up. So even before anything this should be done, there's an element of funding. So if the country can confirm that there's funding, then whatever we're talking about here is possible. Whatever I'm talking about of the timing and how slow we are, it's just my own personal views. But still, this can be expected. If at all, just like Mother Timothy said, that interest. If this aligns to the interests of political actors, and they say that for the close to 40 years, we have been in a good direction, and we think that there's a need for us to rechange a bit to be in a better direction. These are things that can help us, do miracles. I mean, yeah. Diaspora and prisoner voting, we don't really need much for that. So Isaac, what I think here is one.
Because the fear also, sorry to interject, the fear also from the citizens is that we might trash the process and then we only obtain cosmetic benefit out of it. Because like Timothy correctly pointed out, in the run-up to the 2016 general elections, the process where there was, extensive, broad consultations with the various stakeholders, the citizens, the academia, civil society, political actors, and those views were reduced into a document called the Citizens Compact on Electoral Reforms. But out of those so many submissions, the government simply adopted one, which was to change the nomenclature of the Electoral Commission from the Electoral Commission and add the Independent Electoral Commission. So such a change is really superficial. It does not improve the quality of the electoral processes or the system at all. So maybe as you respond to that, you also need to take account of that.
And you're right. But again, I want to give an example that most parents are telling their children to go to school because if you go to school, there are no jobs, right? Or a lot of mothers are dying while giving birth, so I want to get pregnant because I may die. I don't want to think in that line, and of course try and error. Everything is, you have to reach there before you confirm. Let's go when we reach there. We might think that, of course, before people have been giving ideas but have not been captured. You have a good idea, you want to bring it out, but it will be shined down. The Citizen Compact we're talking about, nothing was. Now, if we can't bring back the booklet to use, let's try the new one. I really want to second Mpuuga to continue with these changes. I want to add my support to Mao to convince the president. If this is successful, then we are growing, and by that perhaps maybe even the political elites, people are changing. If you heard the speech of Minister of Works at KIU. He was the guest speaker. He's the Minister of Works. What is his name? Otafire.
Internal Affairs Minister.
Internal Affairs.
Yes.
Oh my God. The other one is Wamalwa. We have a lot of ministers, so you can't capture so many generals. So what I'm saying here is you can see that from the General Otafire of 5 years ago is not the same. There are things that, the more they are growing, they're also seeing that we are living this country, how are we living it, right? We are about to exit the scene, how are we living it? So you never know, perhaps this could be a game changer. Perhaps this could be something that God could use them to, we're a religious country, for God and my country. So something could happen and they'll say, we want to leave a parliament having 100 MPs, right? It's okay. Maybe with 40 upper house, with maybe only 30 ministers. It's possible. Why are we having all these ministers, right? So I think this is something doable, but only if you're intentional as a country. It depends on where you want to go. Of course, we have the 2040 vision. I mean, a lot of good things there, but are we following it up? We are only trying to put salt on the wounds. So if we are very intentional and know what we're looking at, of course, considering the Auditor General's report, I had it being read recently, the census report of how many youths are now unemployed after graduating how many are intubating, how many are, you know, how many cares are there without functional. How do we now recollect ourselves as a country to see that now there's somewhere we want to go? And where we want to go, we need finances. And when we are using the number of ministers of the cabinet, we are creating another finances to tackle certain obligations. When we are trying to really make the Electoral Commission very independent, we are making young people like us who think that we may come to leadership to have to love the process. Just like Timothy said, that people think that some of these elections are already predetermined. So they're like, why will I even be voting? Yet we know the person who will get. So we really don't trust the process. And we are the citizens, so, you know. So if we can still, you know, reassess ourselves, be intentional, and, you know, start from rebuild, then there's somewhere we're going to go as a country. And this could be successful if, of course, God and Mao is a religious man. Mao is a religious man.
Okay, Tim, let us now examine the general approach of the opposition to this conversation. It seems to me that the Honorable Mpuuga is running a solo effort. The official opposition, leader of the opposition in Parliament, the National Unity Platform, is yet to really register any strong official input with respect to this process. I think the last time, while he was still the leader of the opposition, he made an effort to bring together all the stakeholders in the opposition with the view of again mooting a conversation on the electoral reforms. And he was discouraged strongly by the leadership of the party, particularly the president, saying that that is not the most urgent and critical objective for the opposition. That even if it were, so long as Mr. Museveni still presides over the state of affairs in the country, it would be an attempt in futility. So where does this now leave the effort by the Honorable Mpuuga? Because as I understand, it could be perhaps difficult for him to fast track it alone without the broader support of the opposition. Does it point to a disjointed strategy by the opposition?
Absolutely. The opposition, where it stands now, it's in a very sorry state. They are divided. They are chasing different agendas, and in fact, you know, as it stands now, we are having the opposition very disjointed. You have FDC; they are fighting internal wars. There is a Katonga faction. There is Najana Nkombi faction, and so the attention is, you know, naturally divided. You have the opposition in the Minister of the Constitutional Affairs, who, you know, should be part of the opposition and championing the same cause, is in the cause of convincing the president. You have the NUP also, who now also partly they're also struggling with their own internal issues, including you know, Mpuuga, who is a member of the official opposition, the NUP, trying to champion a cause, but also more importantly, looking at it from the perspective that there are so many issues that the opposition is grappling. Actually, as we look at it today, the opposition is fighting to save some of the recommendations being put by Lumu, you know, of having the opposition, how the leader of opposition and how the office of the leader of opposition operates is something that now we are fighting. And so as it stands today, I think that the opposition is in a place that cannot put a formidable force, partly because of the situation and the challenges that they are going through. Mpuuga is also, you know, is still struggling with the question of legitimacy arising from the recent challenges he's facing with his party, the NUP, and his legitimacy question. And so part of even the presupposition is that the move by Mpuuga to bring the constitutional reforms, whereas it's indeed a goodwill to ensure that we have a better legal framework, is trying to address the legitimacy question. in the eyes of the people on the concerns around allegations on his involvement in the 500 million or the 1.7 billion monies that had been
Service award.
so the service award. So there's a legitimacy question. And so again, maybe just to highlight the question of timing, it is absolutely unfortunate, you know, that we have to be looking at the reforms a year to the elections. Again, as Clyde highlights, there are logistical questions that that have to be put into consideration. There are issues to do with the capacity of the Electoral Commission to execute some of these matters. And so, I mean, the mistakes or the question of timing, while it appears to be spontaneous, it is a deliberate way of doing things. It's not the first time that a year to the elections, the reforms are being brought or the reforms are actually being discussed in the first place. We found ourselves in the previous, you know, towards the previous elections, and it has been the same. And it seems to be a successive pattern. And looking at it, it seems to be serving the interest of a specific individual or a specific group of people. And these, I am likely or inclined to believe, the incumbency seem to be benefiting from all this confusion. Because ideally, we should have had these discussions 2 years back in light of the recommendations that are being proposed. Unfortunately, I think that there are so many things that, there are so many distractions, and we seem to be reactionary as a country. As and when we are almost heading towards the election is when we remember, hey, there are electoral reforms that needs to be implemented. So it's true, there are those that require administrative changes here and there, as Clyde highlights, but there are those that require constitutional amendments. They require the constitution to be amended, you know, which may not be realized in the short term. The opposition, their fate is really in a very not so good state, to the extent of their ability to even collectively champion for electoral reforms. The current state is being very divided. It becomes extremely hard for them to push for this agenda. While Mpuuga is pushing for this agenda, there is a group of, you know, of opposition who are looking at him from an angle that he's trying to save face, you know, from the issues that have bedeviled him in the recent past. And so, where does this leave the country? It's the country that loses. It's the democracy that loses. I know that this conversation could even, you know, contribute to the future electoral reforms. But as it stands now, there is very little that the opposition can push, can champion towards a better legal framework around the electoral reforms, partly because of the challenges that they are going through, the interests that are divided, and the place of the Electoral Commission in light. You've seen FDC, a section of them are struggling to even register a political party. A year to the election. So there's a bit of more confusion within the opposition for them to have a meaningful contribution to this. And in fact, I think this may partly affect how the results of the opposition will reflect in the elections. Yeah.
Tim, before I bring in Clyde, what is your analysis of the move by the Honorable Matthias Mpuuga to seek the leave of Parliament and introduce his proposals before Parliament? Do you foresee a situation where the Speaker assents to such a request?
Absolutely. You know, the lawmaking process sometimes can be political, but also sometimes can be to address a specific issue. In this case, Mpuuga is addressing two things. One, contributing towards the electoral reforms as first of his agenda. Two, is addressing the question of legitimacy on the face of the people. And the legitimacy question is his ability to even serve the people, and the question of corruption that is lingering around his head, including the rest of the commissioners and some of the other people in parliament, who seem to be having spots of in the face of the public to have been involved in the corruption. And so any attempts by Mpuuga to reflect and to push for a perception in the public that he is working, he is indeed serving the interest of what he was sent to to do in parliament. And so I think that to the extent that he still has a lot of favor within the leadership of parliament as it's still now, I foresee a situation where he will present these matters and they will be received, but
before parliament.
But they won't go. They won't stretch. There will be a proposal by government, by the Ministry of the Constitutional Affairs, requesting that some of those be consolidated or there be harmonization. And so the proposals, definitely I've seen the clerk has already received the notice from the Honorable Mpuuga, and so I foresee a situation where these will find favor in the face of the leadership of parliament, but won't go very far. Yeah.
Clyde, what is your assessment of the capacity of the Electoral Commission to administer and also supervise a free, fair and credible election come 2026?
There have always been, since I started witnessing the elections in this country, when I became a bit mature, I think 2006 2006 I think I was a bit mature, and that's why the first time I witnessed election and how I think BSG and Museveni went to court and court decided on who the next president would be. Yeah, but what I was bringing is that there have always been issues with the Electoral Commission on its capacity to be neutral. And of course that's when by 2016 they added the word independent. Now the word independent is just a word, but the people inside and the systems there, if they're not independent, then they're not independent. We witnessed the previous election. We witnessed a number of candidates not being given a fair play. Remember, from after the nomination of Honorable Kyagulanyi, he had to be directed home. So there was nothing like waving to people going back, and of course we saw the Honorable Engineer Power moving on foot, and of course the question was, why not giving us the same environment? Of course there was something like there was COVID but I think that unless political parties are effectively engaged in the nomination of these people, verification, we shall never have an independent body. But also which political parties, because just like Brother Tipota said that now the all political parties in Uganda are having issues. There's been a lot of question marks. For example, if you talk about David Sinanja Kumbi, there's a question, there is an allegation that there is NRM in them. And of course, even the Katonga, they are saying, there's a reason they are breaking off. They want to confuse the FDC. The issue of Noop and Matthias, UPC, Akena, and of course the other function, the wife being in government, now DP, the President General in government. So even still, I think it goes back to how we build our systems, right? How we accept political parties to also work independently without our influence, without, should I say, without putting their, there's a Muntu could call it. There's a, before he left, they would say that he was a what?
It was a mall?
A mall, without putting malls and all this. But again, Isaac, if we go very deep in the root cause analysis, there's a way this thing comes. Because to be a mall, they should have been convinced maybe a package. And what brings this is poverty. So unless the government, of course, the incumbent government, NRM, work so much for economic emancipation of the citizens, we shall still have these issues of somebody, if you want to be called to the government, you'll have to abuse the Honorable Kyagulanyi or abuse VSJ or abuse, so that you're seen as a good person and the next day you're being appointed as an RDC or whatever the case is. Why? Because you're looking for how to survive.
So you're citing poverty as a major drive of the governance problems of the country.
Very clear. Very clear. Because if you go to school, you know, you've gotten good education, there are no jobs. Now, what do? You start, you know, becoming a foot soldier either for NRM or for the NUP, and the next thing is, if you are so instrumental, you're called, right? And I think if this goes like this, then we are heading to a country where, I've read a book called Why Nations Fail, and a lot of things there. You know, if you leave people down, people are ever asking for support, we are ever asking for money or PDM, for Mpuuga to come, let this money come to our pockets. And even if it comes, because if you don't have ID, then you can't use it. When it comes, you have a sick, and you know the principle of money. Every time it comes, you have a sick mother, there is somebody who calls you, and by then you're not doing what's supposed to do. So I think, even if we talk about the independence of the commission, but now I don't think it is really independent, because most political actors complain about it. VSJ, for the 4 times he was a presidential candidate, he talked about the commission and how it was not giving him an enabling environment to participate. And of course, when the new opposition chief now came in, the Honorable Kyagulanyi, even the DP president, when he was still, he said the same thing, including General Mugisha Muntu and every candidate, that it favors the incumbent. But there has not been an occasion where this has always been addressed, right? It could only be addressed if that document that was bought, if it was captured, it could, you know, if it was implemented, it could have, you know, collectively. I like the way Kenya brings on board the IBC members, right? You know, they engage every political party, they write to them, you know, there's the Civic and all this. Not all, like, of course, the last president who now writes to, but the first they engage every political party, and do you have an issue with this? So that you think that if, when I'm not there, I have what? I have somebody who does not represent my interest, but somebody who represents all our interests as the country. Because the commission should represent the interests of the country, not a specific individual's interest. Now, if you have a commission where if Isaac and Clive stands, Isaac's already at 80%, then, you know. So that's where we go wrong. And if we don't really work on of course, when I was talking about the CIVIC, now talking about the constitution, right? How are we abiding by the rule of law? How are we following up all this? How are we engaging the citizen? How we engage the citizen means that we're even respecting their views. So if I woke up and elect my member of parliament, I want that one to be the member of parliament, not another person. Not a person who has more influence, not a person who has more money. And just like Brother Timo said, that the Ugandan politics is becoming so weird, where if you don't have money, not to go there, right? So you need to work in either public sector for some time, amass money, be corrupt, get money, then stand for member of parliament. So when you also go there with the mindset that you now reach there and there's no money apart from your salary, you now start. That's when you saw last time when there was issues of documents calling commission that we shall add your budget if you give us this money. So MPs were bidding on where they're not supposed to bid. How does that come? Poverty. So everything here comes to poverty. And it's also to the IBC, not IBC, the Electoral Commission, IBCs of Kenya. So the Electoral Commission, if they are empowered also and they love the country, no one will convince them anything that we shall give you this. No, they will do the right things. So I think if we don't empower people from the community level, that trend will just move. We shall have people who are growing up with that corruption mindset, unpatriotic, unethical, it goes to where they are going to be, whether they're going to be members of parliament or presidents or whatever capacity they are given to lead.
Thank you, Clive. Kindly share your closing remarks with the citizenry out there on the program.
Okay, thank you very much, our viewers. It's nice for you to have joined us this morning, and of course discussing critical issues affecting our country. And of course, as a student of leadership, I took a course called Mindset of Nation Building. I was taken through what citizens should do, how communities should be empowered to see how they're building their nation. And first thing starts from how we empower ourselves from the grassroots. I keep telling my people that don't wait for government or politicians to come down where you are. The things you can do for yourself, support yourselves, right? Build up yourself so strong that even a politician who comes with the resources, you will have to ask them, what are they bringing? What do they stand for? And when you become empowered, you will reason. You'll not be given, you don't be bribed to sell your vote for leadership. So I think it's good enough that such programs are giving us space to air out our views and see how to support our country in development. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Clive, for sharing your perspective with us. Timothy, your closing remarks on the program.
Thank you, Isaac, and thank you, Clyde, for the show. And thank you to our viewers for having journeyed with us up to this point. I think for me really is to emphasize the fundamental role that elections play in our democracy. It forms a strong pillar in how societies are governed. And speaking to the people that are watching us and listening to us is to say that we must participate in this process. It is timely that we are having this conversation, and we must participate both in the formation of the law, in bringing on board these leaders, and more importantly, supporting them and holding them accountable in the leadership. We are now heading towards the general elections, and we must demand, ask our citizens, and even instruct others to ensure that they are part and parcel of this process. Why? It's because the choice of not participating is extremely expensive. It means that you have inefficient leaders, you have unaccountable leaders, our resources will be misused, the kind of policies that will be put in place would be not in line of the people. And so it is extremely expensive. It is extremely unfair to the country when we choose not to participate in this process. And specifically to the young people who actually form the majority of the electoral the electorate, is that one, please ensure that you go and you go and get the national ID. Two, ensure that as the leaders are coming on board, we work towards bettering this country. Again, I hold the position that the politicians in this country, right from the top to the bottom, have failed us. And that as citizens, if we do not take this mantle, the country will go to the dogs. And so we must ensure that we are part and parcel of this process of ensuring that we elect the leaders that we want. That we must offer ourselves for this leadership, both at the lower and the top and the top levels of the leadership, so that we're able to champion the leadership that we want to see, so that we're able to champion a transition of the current leadership that is headed by the president for a better country, for a country that is equitable, for a country that is fair, and that we can all be proud to be Ugandans. The democracy, as we see in other countries like Kenya, Ghana, and all the other countries, it's a process. And that even as we look at the electoral process, we must appreciate as a country that it is a process and not an elections are a process and not an event. As it stands now, looking at the challenges we are facing, at the collusion we are rushing towards to put in place laws, is because of the mindset of the current structure and leadership, looking at elections as event as opposed to the process. This process that we are discussing today should have happened 2 years ago, a minimum of 1 year back, but we are now rushing towards ensuring that, oh, these laws should be put in place. But definitely I think is to ask Ugandans, please, this is our country, let's participate, let's be part of this process and champion for a better country. Thank you.
Many thanks, Timothy, for sharing your views with us on the program. Once again, I must appreciate you, gentlemen, Timothy Chemonges and Clive Odhiambo, for your able participation on today's edition of Focus on Parliament, and also for your sound advice to the citizenry out there. Many thanks to the production department for keeping us live on air. Our esteemed viewers, please, thanks for joining us on today's edition of Focus on Parliament. Engage us on our social media platforms. We are on X, we are on Facebook, we are on YouTube, where you can watch and also subscribe to our channel. We'll see you next time. Be blessed.